In the heart of the Roman Republic, the sky itself seemed to weep for what was to come. Storms gathered with unnatural speed over the 7 hills. Lightning split the heavens, and it was said that statues of the gods bled from their marble veins. Priests and augurs frantically tried to interpret these terrifying omens, but the signs were clear. A storm of blood was about to descend upon Rome, a maelstrom of violence that would be known forever by one name: Cannae. The architect of this fear was a man who haunted Rome every waking moment and filled its darkest nightmares: Hannibal Barca. 4 years he had marched his army across the Alps, through the heart of Italy, leaving a trail of defeated Roman legions in his wake. At the Trebia River, he had lured them into an icy trap. At Lake Trasimene, he had ambushed and annihilated an entire consular army in a dense fog. Hannibal had outwitted Rome's best generals, again and again, using their own aggression and predictability against them. His name was a curse on the lips of every Roman citizen, driven by a mixture of terror and fury. The Roman Senate and people decided on a final, decisive solution. No more skirmishes, no more Fabian tactics of delay. They would raise the largest army in the history of their republic, a force of unprecedented scale. Nearly 86,000 men to find Hannibal and crush him once and for all. This wasn't just a military operation. It was an act of national vengeance. Every family, from the richest patrician to the poorest plebeian, contributed men to this grand army. They were convinced that sheer numbers, Roman discipline, and raw courage could overwhelm the Carthaginian genius. But Rome's strategy was more complex than simply assembling a massive force. They understood that Hannibal didn't exist in a vacuum. His power relied on a network of alliances and supply lines stretching across the Mediterranean. So, while their main army prepared to confront Hannibal in Italy, Rome launched a multi-front war. They sent legions to Iberia, modern-day Spain, to strike at the heart of Carthaginian power and cut off Hannibal's reinforcements. They planned expeditions to Africa to threaten Carthage itself, forcing them to recall their greatest general. Legions also worked to pacify the Gauls in northern Italy, who had flocked to Hannibal's banner. Rome sought not just to win a battle, but to completely dismantle Hannibal's entire support system, isolating him like a virus before destroying him. In a fateful decision, command of this grand army was given not to one man, but to 2, as was Roman tradition. The 2 elected consuls for the year were Lucius Aemilius Paulus and Gaius Terentius Vero. They could not have been more different. Paulus was a veteran aristocrat, a seasoned commander who had seen Hannibal's brilliance firsthand. He was cautious, methodical, and deeply respected the enemy he was about to face. He urged patience, arguing they should fight Hannibal on ground of their own choosing, avoiding open plains where the enemy's superior cavalry could dominate. His co-commander Varro was the polar opposite. A man of the people, he was brash, impulsive, and immensely popular for his aggressive rhetoric. He openly mocked Paulus's caution, calling it cowardice. Varro promised the people a quick, glorious victory. He believed the massive army was an unstoppable force that needed only to be unleashed. The 2 consuls shared command, alternating authority each day. This division of strategy and temperament, built into the very leadership of the army, was a disaster waiting to happen. On the day of the battle, it would be Varro, the man craving glory, who held command. As the 2 armies maneuvered near the Aufidus River, Hannibal laid a clever trap. He left his main camp seemingly abandoned, hoping to lure the Romans into a hasty and disorganized attack. The prize was too tempting, and the Roman vanguard, eager for plunder, began to move forward. But a stroke of luck, or perhaps the caution of a junior officer, saved them. A warning was sent back that the camp felt too empty, too easy. The Romans pulled back, narrowly avoiding Hannibal's initial ambush. The Carthaginian's trap had almost sprung too soon, but he was patient. The Romans had been saved for now, their doom merely postponed. Finally, the stage was set. On the morning of August 2nd to 16 BC, on the flat, open plains near a small town called Cannae, Varro decided to offer battle. The conditions were perfect for Hannibal and terrible for the Romans. The late summer sun was searing, and a strong wind, the Vulturnus, blew from the southeast, directly into the faces of the Roman soldiers, carrying clouds of dust and grit that would blind them and parch their throats. Hannibal positioned his army with the river, protecting one flank and the wind at his back. He arranged his infantry not in a straight line, but in a shallow, forward-curving crescent, with his weaker Gallic and Spanish troops in the center and his elite, veteran African infantry held back on the flanks. The deadliest trap in ancient history was now set. Under Varro's command, the Roman legions formed up in a deep, dense formation, designed to punch through the enemy's center with brute force. The trumpets blared, and with a deafening roar, the massive Roman infantry charged forward. The battle began. The Roman heavy infantry smashed into Hannibal's crescent. Just as Hannibal had predicted, his Gallic and Spanish troops in the center began to give way under the immense pressure. The Roman lines surged forward, convinced they were winning, that the Carthaginian center was breaking. They pressed their advantage, pushing deeper and deeper into the bulge. But they weren't breaking the enemy. They were walking directly into the jaws of Hannibal's trap. As the Romans pushed forward, a terrible realization began to dawn, but it was too late. The crescent shape of Hannibal's line had been a deliberate deception. As the center bent backward, Hannibal's elite African infantry, who had been held in reserve on the wings, did not retreat. Instead, they stood firm and then began to pivot inward, like two giant doors swinging shut on the flanks of the now overextended Roman column. At the same time, Hannibal's superior cavalry, having already defeated their Roman counterparts on the wings, wheeled around and crashed into the rear of the Roman infantry. The trap was sprung. From all sides, Hannibal's forces struck. The Libyans, Numidians, and Iberians slammed into the Roman flanks and reared. Suddenly, the largest army Rome had ever fielded was no longer an army. It was a terrified mob, completely surrounded, with no room to fight and nowhere to run. The encirclement was total. The Romans, packed so tightly together they could barely lift their arms to swing a sword, became a single, writhing mass of humanity. Panic replaced discipline. The dust, the sun, the screams, the press aborded it, was a vision of hell on earth. What followed was not a battle. It was a methodical, industrial-scale slaughter. Trapped in the killing field, suffocating under their own numbers, the Roman soldiers were butchered. They couldn't form lines. They couldn't use their shields effectively. They couldn't even flee. They simply stood and died. Hannibal's men, fresh and with space to maneuver, worked their way in from the perimeter, cutting down rank after rank. The consul, Aemilius Paulus, who had argued against the battle, fought bravely until he was cut down. Over 80 senators and countless other Roman nobles fell alongside the common soldiers. When the sun finally set on that horrifying day, over 70,000 Romans lay dead or dying on the plains of Cannae. An entire generation of Rome's fighting men had been wiped out in a single afternoon. A republic was nearly destroyed. In the aftermath, the scale of the victory was breathtaking. Hannibal, his army exhausted but triumphant, walked the field of corpses. He had achieved the pinnacle of military art, a victory so total it was almost unbelievable. Cannae became the textbook example of a battle of annihilation, studied by generals and strategists for thousands of years to come. For Hannibal, it was his greatest victory. For Rome, it was their darkest hour, a day of such profound loss and humiliation that it would be seared into their national identity forever. The road to recovery would be long and brutal, but the lesson of Cannae would never be forgotten. Thank you for watching. If you found this journey into one of history's most decisive battles fascinating, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories from the ancient world. Let us know in the comments what other historical events you'd like to see us cover. Until next time.